I'll be reading this morning from the book of Philippians, chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. And then the passage in Matthew. Philippians 2, 1 through 4. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with his Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. In Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 to 28. Now as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and they will condemn him to death, and will turn him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And on the third day he will be raised to life." And then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. And she said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink?" "We can," they answered. And Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. And Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."
Let's see if had a few technical glitches this morning, but I think we've got them. Me and electronics, I think I've told you, don't always see, like right here, I just remembered I forgot to turn this mic on. There we go. Maybe one of these days me and electronics are going to make nice and be friends. Yeah, don't bet on it. But let's consider a question here as we're getting started. Why exactly did Jesus come to the earth? Why exactly did he die? Man, there's several reasons we can look at. For one, obviously to pay the cost for sins. 1 John 2:2 says that he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but for the whole world. Now, propitiation is just one of those fancy words that means he paid the cost for our sins. And then Isaiah 53 verse 6, "All we like sheep have gone astray, and we have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid the iniquity of all of us on him." And then he condemns Satan. Remember in John chapter 8, he told the Pharisees, "You are the sons of your father, the devil." And he is the father of all lies. And later on, John said, he who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifest or made known, that he might destroy the works of the devil. And then Hebrews chapter 2, inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil. And then it's to give believers a new life, a chance to start over with a clean slate. Therefore, if any man is in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And then Romans chapter 6, we are buried with Christ in baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, so even so we should walk in a newness of life. We are buried with him into death. We died to our old way of life. Death is a pretty radical break, because you can put 10,000 volts into a dead body. It's not coming back to life. That should be the way sin is with us. That nothing can draw us back into that way of life. We are dead to it. And then the thief did not come except to steal and kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. Here, Jerry Vines is a retired Baptist preacher. He used to preach for the third largest Baptist church in the country in Jacksonville, Florida. And he said, our churches are in serious trouble today. There is virtually no difference between the average church member and a person who is not a Christian. God meant for the Christian to be different and to live a different kind of life, and to be on a different moral level than those who are not Christians, and yet there is practically no difference in lifestyle. You see, as Christians, Jesus didn't come for us to die for us so we could just be like everybody else. He came so that we would stand out. Years ago, when Ronald Reagan was running for president, he said that his party needed to stand out as bold colors, not pastels. Pastels, you notice, kind of blend in. Bold colors, like the old test pattern here, stand out. Or like this, dare to be different. And as Christians, we've got to show a different kind of life. And this series we're going to start today is from this article, 6 Things Jesus Didn't Die For. We look at why he died, why he came, but there are some reasons he didn't come, and this is one of them. This is from BeliefNet.com. This was relayed to me with a note that said this would make a good sermon, and I read the article and thought, actually that makes a good series. So that's what we're going to look at for the next about 6 weeks. Things Jesus didn't die for. And we're going to start by looking at our selfish ambition. Now, there's nothing wrong with ambition. Let me be clear about that. You got a teenager, let's say, or a 20-something. They have ambition to go to medical school or law school or be an engineer. That's fine. We have ambition maybe to buy a house. I get up and I'm ambitious today. I'm going to go out and get I'm going to work in the yard and do this or whatever. That's good. That's fine. But when ambition gets to where I've got it where I'm willing to step on other people, I'm willing to hurt other people to fulfill it, now we have a problem. And in this article, it says that selfishness should be anathema to Christians. It should be, something that's just really terrible to us. It goes on to say that selfishness should be the sort of thing that are horrid to encounter in ourselves and in our lives. It should be something we loathe and try furiously to excise from our lives. After all, Christians are called to be selfless. Christians are allowed to be ambitious and should celebrate successes that are fairly earned, but they should never allow themselves to be self-centered. They should certainly never think that Christ died to enable them to pursue their own personal agendas. Whether in business, ministry, or personal pursuit, Jesus did not die for selfish motives. It is a sin for Christians to be, or rather, it is not a sin for Christians to be successful. But when the motivating force behind it is selfishness and not giving God the glory, this is anti-kingdom. So let's consider this idea, selfish ambition. As we read here just a minute ago in Matthew, you can see some selfish ambition there among the disciples, those two that want to sit on, one on James and John, one on the right hand, one on the left hand. William Gladstone was a 4-term Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he has a quote attributed to him that selfishness is the greatest curse of the human race. And I think he's right. I think there's a case to be made that selfishness is our greatest curse. And selfishness goes along with pride. And you can see that in Eve and Adam when they went and took the forbidden fruit. They weren't listening to what God told them. And then we come to Jesus, who said that he came to serve, not be served. And when I look at this, it always brings to mind various religious leaders flying around in their multi-million-dollar private jets, chauffeured limousines, being taken from their summer home or winter home, or which are in the Caribbean, to their mountain estate in Switzerland, or coming out to California to the coast, staying in fancy hotels. That doesn't really look like something Jesus would necessarily do. He walked wherever he went. A couple times he got on a boat. And there's nothing wrong with being wealthy or being successful, but we have to remember, ultimately, we've got to have some humility. Look at our text there, beginning in verse 17. Their mother came and asked this favor. And notice she's starting out by kneeling down to Jesus. She's showing him all the respect and worship and everything, but she's got ulterior motives. She's making this request to him based on something that she wants. She wants something from him. Now, don't we do the same thing? How many of us, when we were kids, might go and mow the lawn or really clean up our room because, well, there's a ball game Friday night. I want to go to that ball game. This is basically what we do with God. Do I serve God expecting something in return? When I'm praying or meditating on the Word or studying, am I doing this because I want God to punch my ticket? Hey, God, if you're watching, if you're interested, this might interest you, what I'm doing here. And would you remember it next week when I buy that lottery ticket? Or do you remember All in the Family? There was an episode there where Archie had bought a raffle ticket at church for a TV. He didn't win it. Somebody else did. And he came in from church complaining that I wore out my knees praying for that thing. I think he misunderstood what prayer is all about. And that's something what we in legal terms would call a quid pro quo, which is Latin, this for that. I do this for you, you do that for me. I'm expecting something in return. Pay to play. There's lots of ways you can look at it. But this is when we do something for God where we're just hoping to get a reward like we did when we were kids. We have to remember that true service for God is based on who he is and what he has done. I'm serving God out of a love for God because I want to, just like I do things for my wife or my kids, or I did things for my parents, or I should have done things. Let's put it that way. Because this was a work that needed to be done, or just because they needed help. I should be doing it just because it's the right thing to do, basically. Not hoping to get something in return. This is almost as if James and John were saying, okay, Jesus, you said you're gonna be betrayed, you're going to be condemned, all that. Yeah, but okay, so when you get your kingdom, can we sit on the right and the left side? Is that okay? But Jesus just explaining the most selfless thing he was going to do. And here come these two with the most selfish request. The right, remember, is considered the position of honor. In the military, typically the highest ranking person is going to be on the right if they're going by protocol. And if you look at whenever the U.S. Supreme Court is sitting, the Chief Justice sits in the middle, the next senior is on his right, and then the next senior is on his left. So you've got the two highest ranking ones sitting next to him. And that's what they want here. Jesus in the middle, position of honor, next position of honor. That's what they're hoping to get. And it's their own selfishness, their own pride that's getting involved in this. And what was the reaction of the others? Yeah, guys, good job. Go ahead. Go for it. Yeah, you deserve that. No, you can see right up there. When the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased or indignant or upset. Probably a lot of other ways you could think of to say it, but they were not happy at this request that they made. They were pretty upset with them. And remember, there are other places where we have it recorded. They were arguing about who was going to be the greatest. And Jesus had to put a stop to that because they're missing the point. That's something that he would, as he put it, the Gentile, or people that we would say today, people who aren't Christians, should be arguing over. This is just pride. And that's at the heart of selfishness. I have to have my way. I have to win. And if I don't, well, we're going to have problems. See, that's just all pride. That's just being selfish. That's just looking out for me only and nobody else. Jesus had to teach them a lesson. He had to give them this lesson so they could see that that is not a dignified, that is not a spiritual, that is not a Christian response or an attitude that they were having. Those who don't know me will go around lording themselves, Jesus said. They're going to create hierarchy. They're going to try and keep everybody under control. But Jesus wants them to understand that, I'm the creator of the universe. I'm here in human form. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. But I don't act that way, and I don't want you to act that way. I want you to have some humility, like when he washed their feet on the night of his betrayal. And he told them that, I've washed your feet. Or rather, back up. He said that you call me teacher and Lord, and that's right. Now, that's what I am. That's who I am. And I have washed your feet. Something that a servant, the lowest servant in the house, would normally do. Whoops. Back that up. I don't know. How did it jump that far ahead? Told you me and electronics have a hard time getting along. But Jesus is washing their feet, and he's trying to show them that, look, if I am Lord and Savior, I am the creator, God's Son. All things were created through him. And I'm here washing your feet. You should be able to do that to each other. We call that lead by example. If I'm setting the example here, this is what you should be doing as well. Chuck Swindoll once asked, what does the Lord do to assist me in seeing how selfish I am? He gives me 4 busy kids who step on shoes, wrinkle clothes, spill milk, lick the car windows, and drop sticky candy on the carpet. Pretty good summation there, I think. Because when you have kids, you've got to deal with things like that. You have a lot of messes and things to clean. A friend of mine years ago told me he and his wife had just had their second son, and he said, when you have kids, you can have no pride. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You've got to get down on the floor, he said, and make the truck noises. That's if you have boys. If you have a girl, you got to sit there and let them put the makeup and fix your hair and do this kind of thing. We had a cottage full of 7 girls at one of the group homes we worked at. And one was 16, all the rest of them were under 10. And when we were the relief house parents, we gave their house parents a break. I don't think I ever got out of there without some glitter and hairspray and all kinds of things in my hair. But I always told people, hey, I'm a dad. That's what we do. That comes with the territory. And so as a parent, we're used to that. But as a Christian, I should be used to it too. And then it's where it gets a little more serious, where I might have to inconvenience myself for somebody else. But think of the inconvenience Jesus went through, which means our attitude should be Christ-like. So what do people see? Do they see a reflection of Christ? And you can see in the mirror, this is Jesus, or an artist's rendition of Jesus, and here's someone looking into the mirror. Do people see that in us? And in our text in Philippians, there's some characteristics of a humble person that Paul lists there. And it seems like, now Philippians, the book itself, is filled with a lot of praise and exhortation. But there's a couple of things we think might be going on in the church in Philippi. First of all, you got to think of others before yourself if you're going to be a humble person. Look at verse 3. Do nothing out of, notice, and he qualifies it. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. So there, as we're coming into chapter 2, it looks like there was some kind of some friction in the church there, with some thinking, hey, I'm much better than you, for whatever reason. And so Paul is wanting them to say, no, that you shouldn't be lifting yourself up, but try to lift others up. Be selfless and not selfish, is what he is trying to say to them in the way we think, in the way we approach life, approach others, to be selfless and then have no place for pride to operate. And when we're talking about humility and service, it could be something as simple and routine as you just hold the door for someone as they're going in. You let them go first. Or, when we were kids, especially if we had company, you let them go first. That's good. We look at it as good manners, but it is also, in a way, a sense of humility as well. And then one of the stories that's told is of President Grant, where he was going to a reception where he happened to be the guest of honor. And it was raining, so he got close to a guy who had an umbrella. And remember, this is before TV. This is before the internet. It was possible to be in a high office like that and nobody know who you are. Supposedly, it was up to a year in some parts of the country before people knew Lincoln had been assassinated, just because of communication. So Grant's going in, it's raining, he's with this guy under the umbrella, and the guy, not knowing who he is, says, "I've never seen President Grant, and I'm really going to this reception to satisfy my curiosity. Between you and me, I have always considered Grant to be overrated." To which Grant says, "Well, that's my view also." So us as people, what's our attitude towards ourselves? You don't have to think of yourself as overrated, but do you also try to think of yourself as being better than everybody else? How great I am. We had that same group home where the girls used to make me up. We had a kid there that was on the football team, liked to boast about how great he was until he had a game where he had a couple of passes picked off of him. It kind of brings you down to earth a little bit then, doesn't it? When you turn in a bad performance. A second characteristic of a humble person is that sacrificial servanthood. Look here at verse 8, where he says, "Jesus, being found in fashion as a man, humbled himself, became obedient unto death, even the death on the cross." Humbled himself, obedient to death, even the death on the cross, the lowest form of execution. A Roman citizen under law or by law rather, could not be crucified. They could be executed, but not crucified. And when Jesus took on that human body, he humbled himself to accomplish this task that God had him to do. Come down here, live as a human, go through the temptations we do, everything that we have to deal with, and then he goes to the cross. On Judgment Day, I've known people over the years who would say, "Well, when I get there and I meet my Maker, I'm just going to tell him he just doesn't know what it was like to live the life I lived. I'm going to tell him I didn't know which church to go to. I didn't do this or that." And I got to thinking about it. He was tempted in all ways as we are, but was without sin. So if you try to stand there and play that card with Jesus, that you just don't know what my life was like, he's going to say, "Oh yeah? I went to the cross. Did you have to be crucified? I had people who tried to stone me. Did you? Did you give up all this splendor and go and take on the form of a servant?" That's not going to fly when we try to play that with Jesus. A humble person is someone who's not just going to consider others better than himself. He's going to put it into action. This is where you let someone go first. This is where we help people with our burdens. Galatians chapter 6, we're told to carry each other's burdens and in that way fulfill the law of Christ. That's where we help people with their burdens. Gets a little difficult sometimes there, because at the beginning of Galatians 6, Paul says that everyone, or later on, it's a couple of verses later, he says that we must all bear our own burdens. And the old King James Bible uses burdens in both places. There's actually two different words there. One is a word that says responsibility. The other is this word that says carry each other or help each other. Best way I know to illustrate it is that it is your responsibility to pay your mortgage or pay your rent, make your car payment. That's all your responsibility. But you come in and say, "I'm a little bit short this month. Could you help me?" And I say, "Yeah, sure." And I give you $100 towards your rent or your car payment. That is helping you with that responsibility. Another way to look at it is if you're carrying a heavy load in, you've got the load, that's the responsibility that you're carrying. I help you by opening the door or grabbing the end of it, okay? It's your load, your responsibility. I'm helping you with it. As a Christian, we help each other. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what's expected of us. And they're not going to come and repossess my car because I don't help you with your payment. I'm not going to lose my house because I don't help you. That's your responsibility. Nobody's going to come for me. But I help if I can in those situations. When we live this way, then we are following the example of Christ. We are responsible for our lives, but he's helping us by paying the price for our sins, by coming and living among us and taking on the form of a man or of a human, in spite of all the sins that we have, in spite of the fact that he was the Son of God. He's sitting there at the right hand of God. All things were created by him and through him. In spite of all that, he still came down and lived among us and paid a price for us. And a third characteristic of a humble person is what they do. They do it for God. They do it for the glory of God, which is why Jesus did what he did. Being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death on the cross. Wherefore God has highly exalted him and given a name above all names, that at the name of Jesus every knee shall bow and confess Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That's what his primary mission was, his primary desire was. Everything he did was for God's glory. Whereas with humans, sometimes what I do is for my glory. So I get recognition. But that's not what Jesus was all about. Jesus tells us we should think and live that way. Matthew chapter 5, he said to let your light shine so that all may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Now think about how light works. On the New England coast, there's still some places where you have the old-fashioned lighthouse showing ships where the rocky coastline is and to stay away from it. Airports, a lot of small little rural airports still have this big searchlight or strobe light on top of the control tower that they turn on at night. It just circles to let planes know there's an airport there. That's something you can find. But now if it's dark and I come up with my halogen flashlight and put it right in your face and turn it on, what happens? Everything's bright, you can't see, you're like, oh, will you stop? Turn that light off. That is the first example of the lighthouse or the control tower. That's letting your light shine. You're just putting it there. It speaks for itself. Putting it in your face and turning it on, that's shining it in your face. Jesus wants us to just do our works, live our life, and let our works speak for themselves. I shouldn't be telling people, hey, I got to have credit here. I did come in and run the vacuum here, and I did go and take a meal to somebody, and I did that, and I really should be. You all should be applauding me for that. That's not what he wants us to do. Just let your works speak for themselves, because even when we're sacrificial, it's beneficial. I'm not giving up things. He says because when Jesus came, think of the benefits for us. It's beneficial for us because it can also bring people to the kingdom. You've heard that commercial that asks, what's in your wallet? Ask what's in your heart right now. Is God's word penetrating your heart? See, Ezekiel had this situation where he was preaching to an audience, but it wasn't sinking in. Ezekiel 33, for you, son of man, the children of your people are talking about you beside the walls and in the doors and houses, and they speak to one another, everyone saying to his brother, please come and hear what the man of God says, hear the word of the Lord. So they come to you as people do. They sit before you as my people, and they hear your words, but they do not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their hearts pursue their own gain. Okay, let's put this in modern terms. You invite your neighbor, hey, come to church. We got a really good preacher. You could tell him that. I don't know. Come and hear him. He's got some good lessons. So you invite your friends. Everybody comes in. The preacher gets up, whether me or whoever. They present a lesson. It goes in this ear and right straight out the other ear. And then we get up and say, yeah, that was nice. And then we're off to lunch and going about our lives. That's what was going on here with Ezekiel. He was preaching some powerful stuff. And they heard it. But it didn't penetrate. It reminds me a lot of people that go to churches where the atmosphere, I have a hard time telling the difference between a church service and a concert. There's all the fog lights and the smoke, there's the band, there's all the noise. They walk out all excited, they feel really good, and then nothing happens. I liken it to the first time, if you're a coffee drinker, the first time you had a cup of coffee. I think I was about 8. Yeah, you can think what happened. Bouncing off the walls, you're all energetic, and then what happens after a couple of hours? You crash. And I see sometimes when people go to these places, they're all atmosphere and not a lot of meat in the sermons, and it's a lot of fluff. They go out, it's the same thing. They have a real good high, and then after a couple of hours, maybe a day or so, they crash. That doesn't change lives. That doesn't get any teaching or any Christianity to really sink in. See, it's not penetrating the heart in that case. It's just a temporary fix. It's like that cup of coffee where I'm flying high briefly and then come down. Their mouths are full of devotion, but their hearts weren't. Probably the easiest thing to do as a Christian is to come to church on Sunday. I just have to come in. And I haven't been a preacher all my life. I've come in, sat down, listened to the sermon, sing the songs, and that's easy. But when I'm at work tomorrow, I'm at the office, and here comes the office gossip. Or here comes the one that just likes to push buttons. Am I really going to be putting into use what the preacher said yesterday or what we talked about in Sunday school? When I'm at school trying to study for my test and my nerves are getting frazzled, am I going to act like a Christian or am I going to act like someone whose nerves are frazzled? Is it going to sink in? That's where it gets tough. It's where I have to actually put all this Christianity stuff into practice. Their hearts were full of greed and selfish desires, unjust selfish desires. And whatever Ezekiel was saying to them just wasn't penetrating. And our hearts can get to be that hard, that granite marble hard where nothing penetrates them. And then we're in trouble. Then we know we're not going to be going anywhere from a spiritual sense. This is how selfishness will operate. I want something, and I'm going to get it through honest means. I want that new Chevy Suburban, or I want a new house. So I'm going to work overtime. I'm going to get a second job. I'm going to save my money so I can buy it. That's all honest. But then from there, if it evolves to where I'm going to get it by whatever means possible, I'm going to pad my expense account, or I'm going to pad my hours worked, or I'm going to withhold things that my family needs, like, they probably don't need to eat today, so I'll just take that money and put it aside. Now I'm getting it by whatever means possible. I'm putting me first to the expense of somebody else. And that will cause sin to progress if I don't do something to stop it. And that is where it's going to start getting worse. Begins small and it grows. Kind of like cancer. It begins small. And then it gets bigger. And then we feel the lump. Or see whatever the signs are after a while. And then we got to get rid of it. So the psalmist in Psalm 119, verse 33 says, "Teach me, O Lord, the way of your statutes, and I shall keep it to the end. Give me understanding, and I shall keep your law. Indeed, I shall observe it with my whole heart. Make me walk in the path of your commandments." So some things here he gives us in the psalm. First of all is ask God to help us focus. Where is my focus? Is it on just making money and doing things for me, or is my focus on serving God, expanding the kingdom, serving my family? And then also we need to ask God to give us understanding. Now, sometimes God's ways are just not my ways. So ask God to give us understanding about these spiritual things versus the material things, and to make wise choices there, and then have him direct our paths. Proverbs chapter 3 says to lean not on your own understanding, but trust in the Lord with all your heart. And then ask God to turn our hearts away from worthless things towards the invaluable. That is, the things that don't really have a value to them, because there's no way to put a monetary value on it. How do you put a monetary value on time you spend with your family? How do you put a monetary value on service to God, on my study and my meditation and my applying the Word? How do you put a monetary value on that? There is no monetary value. I can put monetary value on a vehicle, on a house, on a piece of land, but in the end, that's really going to be worthless if I lose my family over it, because I'm trying to better and get more for me, for myself. And our natural tendency is to be selfish, which is why we need God to change our hearts. So that I still have my ambition, but I'm using it in a way that's going to benefit not just me, but my family and others. And then finally, what are my priorities? Is my priority just for me, or is it for someone else? And we use the rich fool, and I've got a lesson on him coming up here in a little bit. But remember, the context for that doesn't start with just a certain man, barns were filled with plenty, or crops produced plentiful. It begins before that when Jesus gets this guy out of the crowd. He says, "Hey, teacher, tell my brother to split the inheritance with me." And Jesus tells about the rich fool in response to this, because this guy's got the wrong attitude about the accumulation of wealth. My brother's holding out on me. Tell him to give me my share of the estate, of our father's inheritance. Because he's wanting Jesus to be an arbitrator. And so he's got his focus in the wrong place. He's focused on receiving what we could call material justice. He wants Jesus to arbitrate. Now, there's an organization called the National Arbitration Association. This is what they do. Instead of going to court and taking all that time and it's all real expensive, you have arbitration, which is usually cheaper and faster. So he wants Jesus, instead of going to court, here, would you just take care of this for me? He wants him to be the negotiator, the arbitrator, the go-between, so that I can get what I want. Now, who's he thinking about? He's thinking about himself. And has the wrong attitude about wealth. So this is where Jesus tells us the parable of the rich fool. And notice he's not a fool because he's wealthy, but because of his attitude towards it. Instead of putting his priorities on thanking God and being a blessing to others, he's on himself. I will tear down my barns and build bigger. I have no room to store my crops. I forget how many times I and me are used in there. But it's obvious he's thinking about himself. And that he's going to live forever, or at least a longer time than he expected, and I just got to build bigger barns to keep all this stuff in. And he's not thinking of others. He's not thinking, how can I use this to benefit other folks? So if we're unwilling to share what God has blessed us with, we run the risk of losing it all. We run the risk if we're going to be selfish. And I can remember a time not letting other kids play with my toys, and I got them taken away sometimes. I got into trouble when I was a kid with my parents for being selfish. So how do you think God looks at it when we're being selfish and he sees us with our pride getting out of control? Probably about like our parents did, don't you think? And when we live selfishly, in the end, everybody loses. I lose, you lose, everybody is, if I'm acting selfish and with pride. As we're going about a new week, let's all ask God to help us be more humble, be more like Jesus, and not let pride and our selfishness get in the way of serving. So that when people look at us, they see Christ reflected. They don't see me and all my failings, but they'll see Jesus. And if we can help you with that, we'll stand here to sing. Let it sink in. And if there is something we can help you with, let us know as together we stand and as we sing.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be.